You are listening to the CAD Call podcast. This is the place where computer-aided design and drafting meets humor and practicality, with a touch of business acumen thrown in for fun. Jim and Rocco, the owners of Zentech Consultants, the premier U.S. technology consulting firm for architecture, engineering, construction, and manufacturing, discuss the fascinating world of CAD with some humor and some honesty. The CAD Call podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the CAD Call podcast. I am Jim Coppinger from Zentech Consultants, and with me, as always, is my partner and better half, Rocco Parisi.
Hello, folks.
Oh, there you go. I was going to say, you're not going to say hello to anybody today? Are we interrupting your day, Rocco?
I'm a little crabby today.
You're a little crabby today. Okay, we'll get by. But hey, listen, I'm going to make you happy now because we have a special guest in the studio here with us today. We have Robert Green with us. Robert Green is the Director of Implementation at CAD. Hi, Robert. And he is a noted speaker, consultant, writer, and an expert on all things CAD. For those of you who may not have heard of him, which I think maybe 3 people on the planet don't know Robert, Robert has run Robert Green Consulting for many years. He's the author of Catalyst's CAD Manager's newsletter, and he's also the author of the book Expert CAD Management, The Complete Guide. So, Robert, thank you so much for being here with us today.
You're most welcome.
Man, I got to tell you before we get into it, have to confess a little bit. I'm a bit of a fanboy of yours. Having worked as a CAD manager for decades, you're always kind of my first source for information and answers. And whenever I've been able to get out to AU, I always make a point of, for years I've hit all of your presentations, and I always read your newsletter, and I'm a big fan. So you've done a lot to help me get my career going off the ground. So thank you for that.
You're too kind, and you're most welcome, and that just makes my day. Thanks.
Cool. Good. All right. So, Robert, like I said, for those 3 people who don't know who you are, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? How did you get to be that CAD management guy that everybody knows? And you started off way back in the Autodesk arena. I know that. And then how did you make your way into the CAD world where you are today?
Okay, so taking it in the same order, I'm a mechanical engineer by education, and that's what I did coming out of school. The timing was just very good. CAD was starting to become a more prominent thing. It interested me. It just kind of fascinated me, and I don't exactly know why, but when it came time for the company to have somebody to kind of manage it and train people and make sure that everything was running, it just seemed like I was the logical candidate, and I raised my hand and I said, I'll do it. And the rest is history. The way that I got involved really with writing is I started to do production software reviews at the time. Before I worked for Catalyst, it was Cadence magazine, which was later acquired. Mm-hmm. I started doing those back in like 1994 or 95. And as just trying to manage all this cacophony of software and different technical things was becoming more and more complicated, I actually pitched the idea of doing an article for CAD managers, and the term really wasn't even known at that time. They gave me the inside of the back page, and they called it Manager's Viewpoint, and it just took off. Yeah. So it was not anything that I ever could have planned. It just kind of happened.
It's amazing how many of us got into the CAD management world that way. I guess, being not young spring chickens anymore, you and I, there was no formal program or training for us back in the day. It was those of us who, like you said, found it interesting and had an affinity for it, and we just kind of stumbled our way into this arena.
Yeah, and just, the most important characteristic, it seemed, was just brute force curiosity and the desire to throw yourself in the deep end of the pool and figure this stuff out.
Yeah.
And that's a characteristic of CAD managers that I still find. For the most part, it's not a job typically that you seek. It's a job that seeks you. Mm-hmm. And most likely we're some of the most communicative technical people. We're not the stereotypical nerds.
Yeah, we're more along the geek lines. Yeah, we can actually communicate. That helps. So that's great. So how did you wind up? Like I said, I know for years, we all knew you at Catalyst and working with Autodesk, and nowadays you're the Director of Implementation at CAD. How did that come about? How did you make that shift?
It started by reviewing their products. We used to do a roundup at Catalyst every year that we called AutoCAD replacements. for lack of a better term. I started evaluating BricsCAD products back at about V15. BricsCAD is now on V20. And as they progressed with every major release, and we re-examined this every year, I just became more and more aware of just the increasing degree of technical proficiency in the tool. It was doing more and more. They were handling essentially all the geometry that could be thrown at it. They were running Lisp programs. I was easily able to go into .NET and VBA projects and port them over. And all of a sudden, I just said to myself, I can do everything in here that I could do in AutoCAD.
Yep.
So I started writing about that, and the BricsCAD guys kind of approached me, and it seemed like a really good idea to get involved with it, first consultatively, which I did for about a year, and then over the past year serving as director of implementation, which is mainly helping larger companies migrate and make sure that BricsCAD is going to be an effective tool for them.
Nice. And that's kind of how we got involved. Like I said, to be fair, and we're not trying to slip anything by our listeners here. Here at ZenTech, Rocco and I, we are heavily on board with BricsCAD as well. And for the exact same reasons, just stunned at how easy it was to make that transition from the traditional Autodesk AutoCAD arena into BricsCAD, and the fact that they have such, to my mind anyway, especially on the 2D drafting side, just such powerful tools that have kind of been ignored on that other side of the market, we'll say, right? We don't want to browbeat anybody because, the competitor
Right.
there is still a really, really solid package. I'm a fan of it, but I just more and more, the more I kept working and looking at BricsCAD, the more impressive I found it. So, all right. So actually, we wanted to the topic for today we're going to talk to you about is CAD managers, the what, the why, and the how. All right. So let's start that conversation, I think, with a definition of what CAD management really is. And I think that for a lot of people out there, CAD management is basic CAD standard setup. It's building layers and line types and maybe making block lists or, family component libraries if you're working in that 3D space. And CAD managers may even be the people in your company who are responsible for installing and configuring your CAD software. Maybe they do a little bit of the training for your drafters and so on. But really, to my mind anyway, that's a pretty limited scope of what a CAD manager really should be doing. And in all fairness, it's probably just scratching the surface of what most CAD managers actually do on a daily basis. They just seem to do so much more than that. So, Robert, I was reading one of your articles just a month or so back where you were talking about there being 3 waves of CAD management and that the industry is really just entering into the 3rd wave now. So what are those 3 waves? If you wouldn't mind explaining to us, what are they, and what do you think that people need to know about the future of CAD management?
Yeah, it's a great topic. And first of all, I agree with everything you said, that CAD managers are responsible for and have to do. It just occurred to me kind of looking back that the first wave, or I would call it CAD Management 1.0, was really the technology was so new, the software was so new, the networks were new, everything about it was new, and none of us had any clue what we were doing. That was me, that was the IT managers, whatever, and we were just struggling to make things work. We weren't really all that concerned with optimization or the financial planning aspects of it. We're just trying to make sure that this raw technology somehow integrated and worked.
Right. It came out and it looked right and things didn't crash.
Right. And nobody knew anything about anything. So as soon as the plotter didn't work, it was a disaster. As soon as you couldn't find a file on the network server, it was a disaster. So it was very much a time of kind of fire brigade mode. And it was something that you had to really be into finding the solution to problems. You had to be kind of very self-motivated, a very bootstrap kind of persona. And that persisted really to me until about the late 90s. When we started to see specialized software, this is when you started to see architectural applications, parametric technologies. You started to see Autodesk getting active in what would ultimately become Revit and Inventor with some company acquisitions. And that's more or less what I would call CAD Management 2.0, which has been until really just kind of recently. Desktop installed applications, more and more specialization, CAD managers more and more being expected to support many types of softwares and workflows and to be on top of all of it. The good news was that the networks were becoming more stable. I wasn't having to worry about plotters being real problematic anymore, networks being more problematic. IT was controlling more of that. But the burden for me was understanding a lot more software.
Absolutely.
So what I think has happened and where we're going here in the near term and what I call CAD Management 3.0 is this this idea that CAD management is no longer a CAD problem; it's an IT problem.
Okay.
And I really do truly see this quite a lot, in my own work, and I see it at customer facilities as well. A lot of times we're having to change licensing technologies. We're pushing things onto cloud applications. We're worrying about security. Where is this stuff co-located? Is my intellectual property going onto a server someplace that doesn't respect our IP rights in the United States? This is a whole different skill set. And this is much more of an IT problem than CAD managers have ever had to deal with in the past. And it also turns out that with the way licensing is changing and the way things are moving to subscription, that CAD is becoming a lot more of a financial problem. We're seeing prices go up, we're seeing budgets being strained, and CAD managers are being looked at to recommend the correct technology to mitigate price increases and to make sure that we're getting the most value that we can out of everything that we install at our company. So in the future, you're going to be less CAD, less engineer, less designer, less architect, and more IT and more financial.
Right.
I believe that, and it's what I've seen in my career. And incidentally, it's been why I've been able to differentiate myself from most CAD managers, because I think I saw that coming before most people did.
Okay. And then looking at that, I mean, do you think that the blending, as you said, of IT and CAD, I just knowing the CAD world and having come, from the design side of the house for so many decades now, the issue is I think a lot of firms are still kind of looking at their IT guy, right? The guy who graduated and he's got 4 certifications from Microsoft and he's got his bachelor's in, information technologies. And they try to look at those guys for that reason, right? So much of it is now hardware and really more tech-based than design-based, that they try in a lot of these firms to push that onto the IT group. And I have found that to be a dismal failure because I don't think you can ever fully get away from the design side that you need. Like you said, those guys who understand engineering, the guys who understand architecture, who have that bootstrap mentality of figuring out the problem, whereas IT guys, to my experience, the hardline IT guys are much more in lines of, you do A, you do B, you get C. And we know that in the CAD and design world, that never happens. You do A plus B, you get 12.
You're right.
Right? So
you're exactly right. Yeah, I would agree with you completely. I think the ultimate thing is going to be an IT staff that is really on top of the technicalities of how do we deploy tools, how do we control this, how do we push security policy. These are things that as a CAD manager, I really don't want to have to worry about, but I have to be cognizant of.
Right.
But somebody who understands the product, I mean, if you work for a car company and you've designed cars as part of your skill set over the years, you're going to be a more effective CAD manager there than somebody with an IT background, because you actually understand what everybody who works there has to do.
Right. And I think that's vital. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that will continue to be the case. But the point that I'm trying to make, to my readers and the people that I talk to, is that you can be a truly good technical, whether you're a car designer or electrical engineer, you can have that skill set, but you're going to have to build, a stronger working knowledge of IT and some of the financial aspects in order to be an effective CAD manager moving into the next 5 to 10 years for sure.
Yeah, I absolutely agree 100%. I mean, pulling off that, like I said, particularly the pricing and the model structures and what you're putting in place and making those recommendations, not just based on what's the good new technology that's going to help you, but what's going to be best long-term financially for the company. I think that's huge. And I think that's an area that a lot of CAD managers still lack a little bit in. So I think that's a real important point.
Yeah, I agree. It is a lacking skill set. And one thing that I try to tell, like when I speak at conferences or whatever, is I tell CAD managers that you're in one of the more promotable positions that you can possibly be in, because if you can demonstrate to me that you can manage technology and training and keeping production deadlines on track, if you can juggle all these flaming chainsaws that are up in the air, you're clearly an effective manager, right? So I see a lot of CAD managers go into engineering management, project management, even up into IT management, because they understand what the IT is actually used for. So, is it worth worrying about all this stuff? Absolutely. It's going to give you a much more forward path in your career if you do.
Nice. So that's perfect. That leads me right into my next question, right? So, CAD management it's a recurring conversation we have here at Zentech with almost all of our clients, right? What standards do they have in place? Do those work? Do you need updates? Who and how and why and when? And for most design and manufacturing firms, that all of those answers usually get dropped onto the CAD manager. And like you said before, right, historically, CAD managers were really that most proficient CAD person who had that ability to learn. They just get the job dropped on them because they had the skills, right, and the interest to make that happen. And a lot of times they wind up with no job guidelines other than make things work, right? And senior management. Not to browbeat anybody here, but senior management in design firms really does have a long history of ignoring and downplaying the importance of CAD and CAD standards and implementation right up until the minute something goes wrong, in which case it's now a major disaster. So I know, Robert, yeah, there you go. That's the way it goes for all of us, right? Yep. You spend a lot of time working with leading CAD managers, around the world. What are you seeing in terms of senior management's change in approach, if any change, to CAD managers? I mean, are they willing to provide the training and the support that CAD managers are going to need to move into those, third wave complex technical positions you're talking about? Or is there still that lingering sense that CAD managers are really just glorified drafters, or they're that, the plotter repair guy?
Sadly, the situation appears to remain the same. And unless the CAD manager is able to go to senior management teams and make a case for what they're doing being financially worthwhile for the company, the situation never gets any better. So quite typically, I'll give you an example. Quite typically, one of the questions that I will get is, my boss doesn't understand what I do, and they never give me the budget to do what I want to do, and they never value what I do. And my response to that is not, oh, geez, let me be sympathetic. My response to that is, well, what are you telling them?
Yeah, good question.
But what message are you taking to them? How are you telling them? How are you saying we need people to follow standards, which is kind of almost sounds like whining? Or are you saying, because people don't follow standards, we're having to expend 200 hours of rework on this project? Mm-hmm. And you can see how I posed it in two different ways, but one is much more compelling to a management audience.
Yeah.
So is management sympathetic towards CAD management? No. Do they on balance understand what's coming in the future? My answer to that's probably no. But management staffs that are fortunate enough to have a CAD manager who understands the financial impact, they eventually get it. But it's a trust relationship that has to be built.
Right. Yeah,
and I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it absolutely does. And I can't tell you, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, going back years in my own career, that was kind of the turning point for me. I was working for one of the larger civil firms here on the East Coast of the U.S., as just like I said, that traditional CAD manager, checking standards, checking drawings, layer controls, all of the basic things, and I couldn't get the support. And eventually, what I actually wound up doing was spending 3 months of my own time after hours putting together an ROI report on people who weren't effectively using standards and people who were going off standard and what the impact was on the bottom line. And I kind of had to teach myself that financial side on my own. And it completely shifted the way the entire company worked. And it actually, on a personal basis, it took me from being just a CAD manager all the way up to being integrated into, as the number 2 guy in the IT group, as the senior, technology training and development guy. And because that's exactly the way that you have to push that forward. You have to be able to bring that argument to the senior management. So yeah. So Rocco, let's bring you in on this conversation and talk about it from, what you see on a day to day. All right. So, with our client base, I know you're always talking to all the senior managers and the guys, and the purchasing agents and the guys who sign the checks. And I know that we do have a lot of discussions about workflow and CAD standards. With most of the folks that we're talking to, do you think that they have a well-supported CAD manager, or are they still just trying to figure out whatever works on the fly, and is senior management really pushing the expansion of that role?
It's interesting to hear you guys describe the CAD manager role and everything that goes behind it. And I guess I never really thought of it that way, but it's all true when you fold it all to, back into one big puzzle. And it varies. I mean, I think the role is definitely changing. I'm definitely seeing CAD managers. You describe the personality. I mean, there are a lot of great people out there, and they do communicate real well. But they're definitely overworked. I'm assuming they're underpaid.
An overworked CAD manager? What were the odds?
Yeah, they're definitely overworked, and I think it varies. I mean, I see situations where they're able to change the mentality of their senior management, and they're able to get folks to work with us from a training and consulting standpoint. But then there's plenty of situations where they'll literally bitch to me in an email, about all this stuff that's going on there, and I'm just like, whoa, I didn't ask for that. that basket.
CAD managers never have any shortage of things to complain about. That is true.
No.
So, all right. Okay. So, it's a problem everywhere. So I think, at the end of the day, solid CAD management equates directly to the profitability of any firm who's working with CAD. Whether you're in the AEC or the manufacturing space, CAD work and its output equates to at least 50% of your product. Right, the designs or the intellectual properties that we all make our living with, right, and ensuring that those are concise and correct and completed quickly and accurately. That isn't just an incidental. I think that the belief that the person or persons responsible for such a massive part of our business, to believe that that's a minor player in your organization and that their needs are negligible, I think that's ridiculous. CAD managers, a good CAD manager is worth their weight in gold. Right? And I promise folks, who are listening to it, you probably don't realize the true scope of work of what your CAD managers are handling for you on a daily basis. Right? And I think CAD managers, you have to do a better job of getting out there and making sure that, the guys signing the paychecks understand what you're doing. So, Robert, let me ask you one more question here. So if there's one takeaway, right, from our discussion we've had so far on the why of CAD management, right? What's important? What do you want the executives who are listening to really understand about, the CAD management position?
First of all, I want to say amen to everything you said before. And you're a great evangelist for the position. I should actually just shut up now and let you finish. But yeah, if I'm speaking to a group of senior management, what I tell them is your CAD manager is your secret weapon, because they're actually out there amongst all your production people. If you think about it, who uses CAD or BIM? Everybody. And if they have anything to do with transcribing your design into a digital format that allows it to be built or manufactured or whatever, everybody interfaces with CAD. So the CAD manager is kind of the one person who sees all that, right? They have a great visualization of the entire landscape of where tools work, where they don't work, where the problems are, where the pinch points are, where things could be done more efficiently. And if you will just listen to them, they will tell you where to gain efficiency. Now, I know the reason that I transitioned from being an engineer into being a full-time CAD manager was because as an engineer, I could only make my company about 40 hours a week worth of money. But by being a CAD manager over 100 people, if I could save each one of those people 2 hours a week, I could make them 200 hours worth of money.
Absolutely.
So the CAD manager is a profit engine.
Well
if
said.
you listen to them.
That's very well said.
If you listen to them. But senior management does not know this. And this is something that unfortunately only the CAD manager can articulate this. So that little elevator speech that I just gave you is something to me that every CAD manager should memorize and be able to take to their senior management staff. And saying it once doesn't do it. You have to be an evangelist. You have to keep preaching this. But over time, if you show them the results, they will get it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you are your own best recommendation, folks. So, all right. So with that, we're actually going to take a quick break here to catch a word from our sponsor for today, and we'll be back with Robert Green in just a minute. You're listening to the Cattle Call Podcast. All right. Today's Cattle Call is brought to you courtesy of BricsCAD. BricsCAD, the new up-and-coming industry leader in both the 2D, 3D, and BIM implementation worlds. One of the things that I really love, Rocco, about working with BricsCAD is that it is, one single software system that lets our users do 2D drafting, 3D modeling, BIM modeling, and even mechanical and sheet metal design, all in a standard native DWG drawing format that's fully compatible with AutoCAD. But it's one system, one file. You can do the work of 4 or 5 different software packages in one single system with BricsCAD. All right, so Rocco, why don't you tell folks how to reach out to us to learn about BricsCAD?
Well, you got a couple options. You got our website, zentechconsultants.net. That's ZENTEK consultants.net. You can reach out to us by phone, 866-824-4459. Or you can email us at sales@zentechconsultants.net.
Perfect. Sounds good. All right, let's get back to the Cattle Call. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cattle Call Podcast. We are here again today with Robert Green of BricsCAD and CAD Management fame, and we're discussing the what, the whys, and the hows of CAD Management. And as always, as I try to do in each episode, this is where we take the time to do the maths. All right, this is where we go and we look at the numbers related to today's topic, right? So doing a little background check here, Rocco, on the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics, as well as payscale.com, as it regards CAD managers, okay? So just kind of put it in reference to kind of people we're talking about here. So the average salary for a CAD manager is $67,081 annually, mid-range salary. Average bonus that these guys see is about $2,000. So, the top 10% of your CAD managers, they're making 90 to 100K, whereas the bottom 10% are making 40 to 50. Okay. The typical education level that we see for people who are holding these CAD managers positions are associate's degree, or that's really traditional. I think that's changing a little bit nowadays. And here's the thing that kind of caught my eye, which really surprised me, is that the growth expectation over the next 10 years, that the Bureau of Labor and Statistics is stating is only 0%. They're not expecting that job to grow, which honestly I can't say I can see how that's possible. All right, so I'm gonna kick this over then to Robert. I'm gonna ask you, Robert. So you ran the CAD Managers survey for years, right? And you gave us all lots of reports on CAD manager salaries and processes and requirements and just all kinds of really great data. Where do you see the CAD manager position going over the next 5 years, particularly in terms of growth and pay and their levels of responsibility? I mean, do you agree with that statement? It's not going to grow?
Well, statistically, there's damn lies in statistics. So I think what's going on is that you're going to have more CAD managers, but they're not going to call them CAD managers. What they're going to call them is project architect, project manager, lead mechanical designer. This is a trend that I saw occur right after 9/11, when we had that kind of mini recession in North America, is I saw the CAD manager being a titled position started coming down from about 60% down to about 40% in a lot of companies. And in many ways, it's not recovered. It took another nosedive after the 2008, 2009 recession and went down to about 30% of companies actually have someone they call the CAD manager. The work is getting done, but it's no longer a titled position. So the real question becomes, why is that? And I think that's because most of us who function as CAD managers are not speaking to our senior management teams about the value of that position.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's and I think that's going to be the case. But to believe that the management of this technology is not going to be a growth thing over the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years it's abjectly silly. It's just that it won't be categorized correctly.
Right. So, I mean, do you see that companies are actually pushing that into, like you said, titled engineers, PEs, people who have, that design background and expecting them to try and learn and fill that in? Or do you see that those of us who have that skill set, who are, quote unquote CAD managers, are, finding the additional education and so on to kind of move us forward and give us those titles? Or is it just a blending of those two?
I think it's a blending. Quite a lot. The thing that I've always complained about the most is, can you do the CAD management in your spare time? I've heard that quite a lot, which is really just, it's code for, I view CAD management as being an overhead activity, not a project activity. So I only want you fiddling with those computers over there, when there's not a job going out.
Yeah.
But when the reality is setting up and properly configuring the software and having standardized practices, best practices, that's what allows you to be more efficient at producing projects.
Absolutely. And long term, in terms of, like I said, the return on investment, you pointed at it earlier, right? When you've got a good set of standards, when you've got a well-versed and competent CAD manager, regardless of what title you're calling them, who is putting out fires before they spread, that goes right downstream, right? You wind up saving hundreds of thousands of dollars on every single job because you're not getting into, RFIs and contract disputes and delays and missed items, right? Those are the things that they can make go away, right? And in my mind, a large part of what CAD management does is actually they're a profit center rather than an overhead. So
preach it.
I always do. You're just the first person who ever wanted to hear it. That's what's surprising me here. Usually Rocco's telling me to shut up.
They need to hear it more often. One of the exercises I'll do when I speak to a room of CAD managers is I'll say, how many of you would agree that your boss doesn't understand what you do? Almost every hand will go up.
Yep.
And then I'll say, but let me educate you. Your boss doesn't know what you do if you do it well, because it's not a problem.
Yeah.
But if you really screw up your job and a problem ensues, management will come to understand what you did not do very quickly. So it really is a problem of communication. We need to be doing weekly reports. We need to be talking to our bosses. We need to be showing them why proactive CAD management saves them problems, because otherwise you're going to get laid off and they're going to figure out how good you are about 6 months after they laid you off.
Right. When nothing's going out right. Yep.
Don't let that happen to you.
There you go.
Communicate more and sell yourself more.
That's it. Bolster yourself. You're your best advertising chain. So, all right. So moving into the next part of this, I want to talk about, so, a huge part of the CAD management world is the how, right? We talked about the why and the what and so on, but let's talk about the how. And one of the first questions that comes up with CAD management is, how do we choose the right software? And then how do we configure that software? And how do we train our people on the software? And how do we handle advanced workflows and collaboration and communication? And, a million other things that all fall into the design process that are invariably just dropped right into the CAD manager's lap, right? I think all those decisions, they're vital to a firm's success. And I think that all too often, as we were saying, the CAD manager doesn't get that executive support they need to implement company-wide decisions, right? You're talking about things that are going to completely dramatically change the way your company works for the better. But instead of allowing the CAD managers to have that level of control, senior management, they default to letting licensed professionals make those decisions, based on their personal convenience and preference about systems and processes that they don't really understand. They're dealing it based on what they like. I like drawings that look this way, and I like things that look like that, and I want it to be like that because it's what they enjoy. It's their personal preference. And to my mind, it's like letting your kids choose, the new work truck that you're buying because they like the color. It's not really a good reason to choose a work truck. So Robert, what do you see as what's the best process for CAD managers to get the support and the latitude that they need to make intelligent business choices with regard to technical support for not just the base CAD, but the overall design process? And how do they convince owners and architects to trust that they, the CAD manager, are the right person to make that call?
I think the primary answer to that is you argue with data. And data in a CAD usage scenario is almost always time for task completion. So what I would do is one of the first cases that I ever did on this is that we were arguing with senior management who refused to buy us an 11 by 17 laser printer. And the reason was because it was expensive.
Yeah.
So their alternative is, well, why don't you just print it out on bigger plotter paper and trim it down to size? And so I actually got a stopwatch out. I said, here's the time that we're spending doing it this way. And then went over to a reseller's office and we did some benchmark timing. I mean, literally with a stopwatch. And you multiply that out and you look at the kind of money and time that you're spending projected out over a year, and you just multiply it by the labor rate of the person whose time you're saving, and very quickly it becomes money.
Yeah.
So it's not a matter of preference. It's not a matter of this or that. It's just these are raw facts, right? So if you just want to spend 3 times more money to do it this way, fine, but please know that you're wrong.
There you go. And the one language that all management speaks, it's the language of money. When you can show them that,
yes,
where the cash is being saved, they perk up and listen real quickly. And I think that's
yes,
and it's a very important thing. I think that everybody on the technical side, like we are, really has to understand. Like I said, I think guys like you and I who have managed to kind of push our careers a little bit further, it all comes down to the fact that we understood that one simple fact. You have to go in and you have to be able to state your case in terms of value proposition. What does it bring to the table in terms of money for the company? Then they will listen to you. So I think that's really important.
One other point I'd like to make is that I actually see a lot of companies overbuying software. They think that everybody needs BIM or that everybody needs a civil design tool, when in reality, there's probably only 10 people there who use that. So they really don't have a good understanding of who's doing what in the overall workflow. And a lot of times they're overbuying software. So it's really always good to just analyze everything. And it's just like getting a checkup every year. Mm-hmm. All CAD managers should be auditing and looking at everything on a continual basis. And I'm just always asking the question, how can I do this better? How can I save money? Yeah. And if you keep asking those questions and you keep communicating that to your management, over time, you're going to get better results. Your management's going to trust you more, and you're going to be seen as a manager, like not that nerd guy, but wow, this guy's actually a manager.
Yeah, that's it. Managers control money and people. They don't control technology. So that's the right answer. So it's funny you should say that, though. I mean, it's one of the first things, we do a lot of consulting work for folks who are, looking for help in that CAD management and all the technology fields. And the first question that I always ask, and it always pauses, the client is, what software can we get rid of? And they just go, what? And don't you guys sell software? We're like, yeah, we do, but that's secondary. For most people, I absolutely agree with what you say, Robert. You have too much software. You're spending too much money for software that people don't use, don't understand, or have overlapping functionality. And that's terrible for any company. So that's an area I think all CAD managers can really make a big impact. And when you start bringing that forward, I think that people will listen to you a lot more. So Rocco, I'm going to bring you back into the conversation here. So again, we're talking with clients. How many of the firms that we deal with on a regular basis do you find let their CAD manager make purchasing and or process-based decisions? Can they make those calls, or how often do we have to wait for approvals to go through C-level staff? And how well do those C-level staff understand, even comprehend the concerns that we're trying to address from a consulting basis?
Hardly ever. It's very, very, very few that can make those purchasing decisions.
Yeah, and I think that's a problem.
It takes a lot of arguments, a lot of internal arguments, to try to change that mindset. But it's rare that unless it's a very, very small firm, it's rare that I see purchasing decisions being made by CAD managers.
Right. Yeah. And then, like I said, it's also a process decision, right? When we're doing a consultant, but how we go, workflow, communication, collaboration, file sharing, all of those things, like you said, do fall into that, CAD manager's purview in my mind. And they really just don't get the ability to give the correct answers. At best, they start the conversation and then get pushed to the background as, the executive staff comes in to make the final decisions. Half the time, not even understanding half of what we're talking about. So, without a doubt, right, choosing the right software and delineating the correct processes, that's a key component of the CAD management gig. And I think that, one of the biggest hurdles that a CAD manager is going to face is implementing changes. And most of us are really hesitant when it comes to change of any kind, right? Because any kind of change means you have to potentially learn new processes. You have to leave the ones you've spent so long developing and that you're comfortable with. And I think that even when we can show that new processes can save time and money, right, which is, step one, you can't make any change without that. But even when you do, I think it can still be an uphill battle to break through corporate stasis. To my mind, there are two key components to making change. You have to make whatever standards or processes you're putting in place easier than the current process. Right? I believe if you save somebody 2 steps in a simple workflow, they're much more likely to adopt the change, right? Everybody likes less work. The second and maybe even the more important step in that is that the change can't be overly dramatic. I just found over the years that, if you can make a new workflow look and act similar to the one people already use, you get less resistance. And one of my things that I always work with people on the consulting side is, I like to make major changes in small steps. Make small changes, moving people in the right direction, keeping folks working closely to what they already know. And you find that you get a lot less grief and pushback from the people. So on that topic, Robert, let me ask you about BricsCAD. Okay, like I said earlier, one of the things that brought us to the table as a BricsCAD partner was just that. It's a very simple conversion, moving from the Autodesk-based products, and I think it provides better tools, honestly, at far less cost. Okay, other than you kind of said the same thing, but in a little more detail, what brought you to BricsCAD, and how and why do you think it should be something for the CAD management toolkit, and what something a CAD manager should seriously consider for their firms?
First of all, I want to go back and say, oh boy, were you right about that. Evolution, not revolution, of making changes. That's, you're dead right there. I was like applauding on mute. What really got me interested in BricsCAD was just that they were delivering a solution with not only as good, but superior speed, minimal memory footprint, stability. It runs faster on less hardware. And it just, the more I started looking at it, the more I was just like, wow, I'm really impressed with this. And that's about the time that I started to get some of my readers emailing me about it and saying, hey, what about this? And so it was just kind of very slowly gaining a little more traction and a little more momentum. So I really dug into it and got to know about what all it could do. And at that point, to me, it was just like, hey, this can do everything that I'm doing with AutoCAD, and it can do it at a substantial cost reduction. So even if we do have to do a little bit of training, you're still producing a really positive ROI for the company. And in reality, the test training that I did a couple of years ago just to convince myself was if you would put it in front of an experienced AutoCAD user, at first, they're like, oh, this is going to be really different. And within an hour, they're like, yeah, that was actually superior.
Yeah. And I think that's the key word to my mind is superior. The thing that really brought me to the table there, things like the quad tool. It's a simple thing, and I don't want to go into it. I know everybody's listening. It's hard to explain the quad tool, but it's a real heads-up display for everything that you need to work with. But what really I think changed my mind and really made me think that BricsCAD was the future is that you're looking at AutoCAD and even other CAD 2D drafting type systems, even on the 3D side. They don't get the upgrades or the changes or the modifications that they really have. It's been a good 10 years since there's been any really serious upgrade to the big name CAD software's based drafting platforms. They get, dark modes and compatibility upgrades, and they tweak one or two minor things, whereas BricsCAD was really bringing in some really amazing tools. The integration of AI into their system, and like I said, things like the quad tool and so on, really does a lot. And I think that's an area that because those other companies have been so integrated into the large scale 3D BIM environment, they've kind of ignored that whole 2D world and haven't grown it. And I think that's an area that BricsCAD really shines.
Yeah, totally agree with you. I mean, so some of the things that are being done under their the overall kind of heading of AI is really super advanced pattern recognition. Mm-hmm. So things like the Blockify tool, the Copy Guided tool, this is stuff that is analyzing, as you're moving the cursor, it's analyzing the underlying geometry, and it's determining where can this geometry be inserted? Should it be flipped? Should it be mirrored? Should it trim? Should it extend? This is really robust stuff. And, you can say, well, that's just inserting doors or windows. But yeah, I mean, if you have to spend 5 minutes inserting every door or window as opposed to 2 seconds, that adds up.
Yeah, dramatic.
And these are enhancements that really just aren't being done, in some of the other stuff. And the other thing that I would point out that really fascinates me is that what they're able to do in a DWG domain, the BIM stuff, the mechanical stuff, without having to switch formats. So it's all done with DWG files, and it's all done essentially using XREF architectures. So these are work methodologies that are well understood. People are comfortable with them. We know how to run them on networks effectively. We have good experience running those around branch offices, through network optimization tools. So we're not having to go out and reinvent the wheel. We're not having to buy new viewers. We're not having to go through all this stuff. We can just stay with a DWG paradigm that we already know, which is even less disruptive. So that's going to provide, I think, it hasn't really taken much hold yet, but I think it's going to give a forward path into BIM and mechanical design for smaller companies who can't really afford the overhead of going into all those additional tools. I think it'll provide a low-cost path forward into some functionalities that really haven't been that well adopted. The dirty little secret about BIM is that it's only at about 20% market penetration.
Yep.
So what that tells you is that 8 out of 10 people sitting at a CAD seat have never done BIM.
Yeah. We've done several of the podcasts on exactly that, and how hard it is, and the transition to move people, and the resistance, I think, to that has been exactly what you said, right? It's getting an entirely new software that has an entirely different work process from the ground up. It's dumping everything you spent decades building as a firm, whereas with BricsCAD BIM, man, it's such a nice little package. It takes the concepts of simplified SketchUp design, 2D drafting, converting over to BIM, and generating away construction documents all within that one DWG. It is such a simple thing to do. I'm a huge fan of it. So I think that's really important.
One piece of software. That's kind of what's amazing about it.
Yeah, exactly. One piece of software and one file type. Where else are you going to get that? So So let me ask you this then. So, in terms of implementation and since that's part of your title, I think you're the guy to ask. How does BricsCAD stack up against its competitors? I mean, where does it stand in terms of, size and speed and performance as opposed to the big names?
Let's see, what order should I take that in? So size, you download BricsCAD, it's about 400 megabytes.
That's nothing.
And it's really compact, and that's everything. I mean, that's all the 2D tools, that's all the 3D tools, that's BIM, that's mechanical. It's everything in one package. The only thing that changes is the license code that you use to wake it up. So if you have a BIM license code, okay, you get BIM tools. If not, you just get regular, conventional CAD tools. That means that from an IT point of view, I'm only having to manage one deployment package that's about 10% of the size of the competition. So in terms of SCCM push, policy push, licensing push, it's a whole lot easier for me to manage that as a CAD and IT administrator. Speed-wise, it's completely refactored. I mean, it loads more into memory, and it analyzes and audits entities better in memory. A lot of times, we'll say, take a file that you can't get loaded into AutoCAD, pull it into BricsCAD and save it back out, and you'll fix it. And
I've done that for several clients. It works amazingly well. It's really nice.
That is the case. And the Redway graphics engine is not real persnickety about what graphics card it runs on. Most of us that do work with it mobile, have gaming cards like GTX 1050s, 1060s. It runs great. So, even on a medium speed workstation that would be sluggish otherwise, it runs very nicely. So it's a robust tool with a much lower IT management and burden and footprint, than the competition. So, it's people don't believe it until they see it. In fact, something that's really interesting is when they go on the website and they download it, you look at the transaction log and it says, user downloaded BricsCAD. And then 30 seconds later, they downloaded it. Then they downloaded it again. They downloaded it again. And that's because the download, in their perception, stopped at 400 megabytes. They thought, well, the download must have failed.
Yeah, it moves so quick. It really is just a few seconds. Yeah. I mean, let's say it's 400 meg. I think the Autodesk logo is bigger than that in their implementations. So it's really. I knew it was much smaller. I didn't realize it was that small. I mean, that's a negligible. Try that in English. Amount to have to download and manage. That's fantastic. So.
And if I take a customer who's been they've been an Autodesk shop for a long time, the degree of difficulty of moving them to BricsCAD is really about like an upgrade. Let's say like going from 2016 to 2019, right? You're still going to have to pull over user profiles. You're going to have to make sure your blocks are in the right place. You're going to have to bring over your CUI files. That's pretty much the degree of difficulty that's there, because all the file types are natively supported. Nice. So you really don't have to start over. Your Lisp comes over, your CUI files come over, your plotting configurations, page setups, palettes, it all migrates over directly. Okay. So the degree of difficulty in terms of getting this installed is really pretty low. And in fact, a lot of the times the most time-consuming thing for me is cleaning out all the garbage. From the 20 years of 20 different releases of AutoCAD that's stacked up.
Yeah, that's it, getting them back down to base. Excellent. So nice. Thank you. All right. So I think with that, we've kind of covered the basics, at least, of, why CAD management is so important to the AEC and manufacturing worlds. But let's face it, there's much, much more to talk about in the CAD management world, and we'll cover that in future episodes, and hopefully we'll be able to do some of those with the brilliant Robert Green back as a guest. So Robert, I really want to thank you for stopping by today and helping us out. You were fantastic. Thank you again.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure, and I'd be happy to come back.
Outstanding. We will definitely be happy to have you. So, all right, everybody. So I want to thank you all for joining us today. We'll see you in our next episode of the Cattle Call Podcast. All right, everybody. Today's Cattle Call was brought to you courtesy of Zentech Consultants. That's Rocco and I. Zentech Consultants works with design and manufacturing firms to help our clients purchase and implement the software that they need in these complex industries. We provide a single point of contact for clients to buy, develop, and learn the most vital software systems for your specific needs. Zentech strives to be your trusted technology partner from your initial needs all the way through long-term support and training for your entire staff. So Rocco, why don't you tell them how to reach out to Zentech?
All right, yeah, you can reach out to us through zentechconsultants.net. You can email us at sales@zentechconsultants.net, or you can even call us 866-824-4459.
Excellent. We look forward to hearing from you all.